So I have the most amazing superpower. I don't know if you have this one, but maybe you do. I can be looking at one thing and be incredibly focused on something completely different, something that's not even in my field of vision. I don't know if you'd consider that a superpower. I know that when it's working for me, people compliment me like, "Hey, you're so focused. It's amazing. You know, how did you keep your focus with all this other stuff going on? That was just so helpful." But when it's working against me, then it's just called being distracted. Which, hey, that happens to the best of us. But it happens to me a lot. And what I've learned, like I said, is that this superpower can sometimes be for me, and sometimes it's actually against me. And this last year and a half, I'm thinking it actually worked against me more often than it worked for me. And maybe you had this happen too. There's just so much data coming in, so much news bite, so much constant updates about news articles, about headlines, about everything. So many opinions coming in, so many reactions to opinions. I'm just so much. And it was as though we weren't supposed to stay focused on any one thing at all year long. I could say for myself it was very, very difficult. You'll have to speak for yourself wherever you are today. But headline after headline. Hey, this just in. People are really not all that great. Hey, this just in. Rich people are getting richer, poor people are getting poorer, rich people don't seem to care that much. Hey, this just in. Some people are really, really racist and really, really hateful. Some people are really judgmental. This just in. People, after all these years, really are pretty selfish. It's just on and on it went. And what I want to share with you this morning is simply a letter from a dying man, a piece of it, from a man named Paul to a young man named Timothy, as he was trying to sum up the best of the pearls of advice that he could give to this young man who was carrying the church into the Mediterranean in his place. He was going to be executed fairly soon, and he was aware of it. He knew it was coming, and he was writing this letter from a prison cell. And he knew back then, just as it is now, that people would find it really, really easy to get all wound up and hot and bothered about all of the craziness that was going on around them. And it wasn't anything that Timothy could avoid. So, as Paul writes this letter to Timothy, he's preparing Timothy to be able to do his job in spite of everything that's going on around him. So this could be so helpful for us going into the future. What do you do with all of the craziness? How are you supposed to handle it? How are you supposed to think about it? And this is Paul telling Timothy about how nuts things may get. And he, of course, is talking about church life. He's talking about carrying the mission of the gospel into the Mediterranean, to all these different places, in spite of whatever may be happening. And listen to what he says. He says, after everything, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. This is 2 Timothy 3:1. He says, and you may relate to this, people will be, let me tell you how people will be. He says they'll be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. That last bit there is just to say that people will have an admiration for what is essentially good, but they will deny that it's actually really important, that it's a must that a person subscribe to what is good. It's optional. It's something that we should all just want to do anyway. We don't need to add God into the picture. We don't have to, honor God or respect God anywhere in that. You can if you want to, but it's not important. That kind of a mentality. And so as we go down that list, you may think to yourself, oh yeah, check, we've got that. Hey, do people seem to be self-obsessed, lovers of themselves? Oh yeah, lots of people like that. Are people in love with money? Definitely. Boastful, yep. Proud, abusive, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, check. I don't even know if there are that many grateful people around. Unholy, without love, unforgiving. I mean, on and on. We could pretty much check every box here in our day and age. And I'm not saying that today is the last day by any means, but if you think about how long ago this letter was written, you could definitely say that the last days must be closer than they were when Timothy read this letter. That's for sure. So listen to all of this, and then at the end of it, Paul simply states, this is a little bit hard, okay? This is 2 Tim 3:5. He says, have nothing to do with those people. So right off the bat, when you are taking in all that's going on around you, and it appears like everybody is just going nuts, they don't care about anything that they should care about anymore, and things are just headed downhill in a hurry, spiraling out of control. He says, have nothing to do with those people. So first off, if you look at your own life and look around for people in your own sphere of influence that are directly just doing the crazy stuff, being nuts, being out of control, first off, he says, you can't align your life with someone that is actually doing that right now. You've got to disconnect from that person. You can love from afar, you can love anyone, but you can't be involved with them. You can't align your life with a person that is doing that. And well, why? Why can that be so important? Well, listen to this. This is just, James's law of physics, so take that for what it's worth. But when someone's life doesn't reflect your life values, and you are trying very hard to maintain a tight relationship with that person, one of you or both of you has to compromise. It's just a fact. It always happens. You have to compromise in order to make your life align with their life. And Paul's just saying, look, you don't want to compromise when it comes to any of these qualities. You can't invite that into your life, or you're going to slowly but surely gravitate toward those behaviors. And so right off the bat, if people are going crazy and nuts and things are out of control, you've got to disconnect from people who are doing that you're sure of. Just disconnect. Doesn't mean you can't love them from afar and interact at a very, very basic level, but you can't have anything to really do with them. You can't align your life. You can't be in a mission together with those people. Wherever you can avoid it, okay? Now, it seems kind of harsh, but listen to how Paul continues. Now, Paul writes a lot to Timothy, and I'm not going to read all of that for you today, but he keeps coming back to this idea of how just unsensible people will become, and just to expect it. He says a little bit later in the letter, he says, the time will come when people will not put up with sound doctrine. In other words, people won't want to build their life around what's really true. Doctrine is really just a word for saying what to do about what is true. That's doctrine. What to do about what is true. And he's saying, look, people are going to not be willing to build life around what is true. Even if they have an awareness of it, they just aren't going to care. They're not willing, okay? He says, instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from truth and turn aside to myths. Wow. It's really hard to wrap your mind around when you stop and pause and just imagine that, wow, people will really not care if it's really, really the truth or not. They just want a version of the truth or an adaptation that they feel like they personally want to get behind. Wow, so it doesn't really matter if it's actually true. Wow, okay, that doesn't make any sense, but that's how Paul says that it will be. And to some of you, I know that's a really discouraging idea, that people would be willing to think like that. I know it discourages me. I want to think, if somebody knows that something is true, that you would do everything to find out what is true. Paul says, no, that's not what's going to happen. Paul says it's inevitable. It's coming sometime. But this is the most important part right here. The next thing he says is this: but you. But you. Everybody else may be going crazy. Everybody else doesn't want to know what's true. Everybody else may be doing all kinds of mayhem and treachery and slander and gossip and all this. But you, he says, but you. Keep your head in all situations. Enduring hardship, do the work of an evangelist, discharge all the duties of your ministry. In other words, do everything that God has instructed you to do. Make sure it all gets done. No matter what is happening around you, you keep your head. Everybody else may lose their head. You keep your head, Timothy. You keep your head. No matter what, you make sure that you do everything that God asked you to do. You've got to keep your head away from the shock of what people will do. Don't get personally involved in the drama, okay? You've got to stay clear of being personally involved in the drama, and you've got to keep your head. You've got to keep your focus. You've got to take that super ability, that superpower that we seem to have within us. Like maybe God put that there, that focus power. You've got to flip that for the good, and you've got to use that for the good of your faith and for the people around you. You've got to keep your head in every situation, regardless of what's going on around you. Yes, lots of people are headed downhill. The culture is just running wild. Church is adopting the world's ideas and places. Yep. You stay locked on to your responsibility. Don't lose that. Yes, people are out of control. That's not your problem. You keep your head in control so that you can help the people that you're directly responsible for influencing. How can you influence anybody? How can you help the situation at all if you just get sucked into the drama and the emotional tension of the whole thing? You can't do that, Timothy. He says you've got to keep your head on straight. People don't appreciate you. People don't do this. People don't do that. You keep your head on straight, Timothy. It's more important than ever that you keep your head on straight when everybody else seems to not. All right? Here's a question for you. What if you actually let yourself become so consumed with doing what is good, with doing what God has asked you to do in your life, that you kind of lose track of the headlines for a while? What if you got so consumed with uncovering what your specific calling is? That's, if you don't know what your calling is, or you never really thought about it in those terms. Maybe you never thought about God giving you a specific mission in this life to do. I'm actually begging you to look into that and get hungry about that and find out if that could be true. I believe that's true for you. What if you just got so sucked into uncovering what that could be that you just didn't have enough mental space left over for wondering what's going to happen of everybody? Where will the country be in 50 years? Where will everyone be going to church? Will there be a church? Will there be faith? Will there be anything? What if you just got so tied up with chasing after what Jesus has for you in your sphere of influence? Maybe it's not a question of what if, maybe it's a question of a who. Maybe that helps you a little bit. As an adult, some of the most comforting memories that I have are actually of people who kept their heads about them, that kept their heads on straight. They went through hardship. They went through whatever it is that they had to endure in order to keep going and doing what they believed that the people in their community, in their faith community, their bigger community, really needed. I can remember little old ladies who prayed for me as I was wasting away in a hospital. And I know in those times that we were just sort of getting started with our war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was all anybody ever talked about. It was in the news every single day. And, young men and women were dying. And it was just, so much tension about whether we should be doing it or not. How long should we be doing it? Why did we get into it? Things that have somewhat died down. But I remember it was just everything that people talked about. And yet, there were people in my life who just were so absorbed, they couldn't get sucked into that. They had to do what they needed to do. For me personally, I remember as a kid, I grew up in a little tiny town, and at the time I'm thinking of, there was this big debate. There was this big court case, actually, where the county wanted to put a landfill in our little rural township, and of course they're going to have to take possession of people's farms and homes, and they're just going to have to bulldoze all that out and take this whole valley basically and turn it into a mountain of trash. And guess what? People in the town didn't like that idea, and so they fought against it. And there was probably 30 families that came together and formed a little organization so they could petition in court and fight against the whole thing. And at the very same time, I have this great memory of this community event in the local church, in this small little local church in that village, where people came together, volunteered, and pulled off basically a week-long Sunday school type Bible camp for kids in like K through 6th grade. And it was exciting for us kids. It was really a worthwhile thing. And I can remember every single volunteer that took part in that camp. I can remember what they looked like. I can remember what their voices sounded like. I mean, some of the things they said I've never forgotten. Some of the things that they said and taught I didn't understand right away, but later on they came back to help me kind of piece my life and my faith together. And it was about the same number of people that it took to pull that off as were involved in the whole campaign to keep this landfill out of the town. And I'm not saying that it was wrong for those people to try and fight against that and keep the landfill out of the town, but what I am saying is there were definitely people in there that easily could have gotten totally consumed with what was going on in their local area, and yet they couldn't be that consumed. They were completely consumed by doing what their community most needed at the time. Even more so than keeping a landfill out, they felt we must help our young people understand Jesus and understand faith. That was a huge deal. And I have so many more memories of people who were just consumed with helping me, even though I didn't appreciate it. People who were just consumed with trying to help me find my way through life. And I look at those memories as some of the best memories I have of people in my life. I cherish those. You really couldn't buy those from me, even if you offered me money. And I think that the reason that they're so important to me is because it was moments like those where someone was so consumed with doing the work and the will of God in their lives to the exclusion of getting sucked into all the drama and all the self-pity and all the stuff that the world easily could have sucked them into. And they were so focused on doing what was right by God and right by me and right by others in the community. And it's in those moments, I think most of us look back and we feel the closest to God that we've ever felt when people become consumed like that. And I'm asking you to imagine, is there somebody who is counting on you just as much as I counted on them and so many others in my life? Is there somebody that you can think of that you can look back and say, wow, that person must have been just consumed. They had that superpower turned on. If they were valuable to you, imagine there could be somebody right now in your community, in your sphere of influence, who is counting on you to demonstrate that superpower and be just as focused on doing the will of God, regardless of what's going on in the rest of the world. They need you to come through. They need you to keep your head on straight, to go through the things that you have to go through in life. If there's hardship, if there are sufferings, if there's sickness. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have been ill or at a physical disadvantage, and still they work to help me and see me through and see other young people through into faith. I'm telling you, there's somebody right now who is counting on you to keep your head on, keep your head about you, and not get sucked into the drama and the worry and the anxiety of all of the headlines, but to stay laser focused on the will of God and the unique calling that God has placed on you and your life. I'm asking you this morning to consider who that might be. And let that inspire you and remind you that the work of God is not done on the earth. And if anything, let the headlines remind you that that's true. Let all of the drama and the anxiety and the fretting and the worrying and all that stuff, let that just serve as a reminder that there is still a unique call on your life. God still has things He means to do. And if you're going to do them, you've got to keep your head on and stay focused. I'm going to pray that you will find that focus today. And if this is a first step for you, just to get hungry again. Maybe you don't know yet, but to get hungry again for that focus and to desire it and chase it and not to give it up, not to give it away for a headline or two. Father, I'm asking you today that you would really dig deep into our minds, into our spirits, and to help us to see just how important it is that we answer your call, that we even want to know what your call is and chase after it. God, I pray, Lord, that we would get thirsty and hungry to know what you want us to do and not to get distracted with everything that is going on, everything vying for our attention all the time. God, would you do that for us to just inspire us, boost us, bring memories and images to mind of people that went out of their way, that didn't get sucked in to all the stuff, that stay focused to help us get to the place we're at right now, just listening to this message. Father, I pray that you'll do that, and I thank you for all that you will do through our lives if we're faithful to listen and dig in. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thanks for listening.